welcome to the second episode of the David Elstein podcast. I'm, really excited about this guest. When I came up with a list of who I wanted to have on there, I thought of this person for thought of something. Let's have a non-controversial topic for the second episode. So I decided to invite on. She's here, my smiling, my friend, Dr. Kim Butler Willis. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks for having me, David.
Yes. And I was joking when I say non-controversial. We're going to be spending, I don't know, next 30, 45 minutes about diversity, equity, inclusion, those topics, which are important topics. Kim is the co-founder and managing director of Goodstock Consulting. So I guess first of all, Kim, what is Goodstock Consulting?
Yeah, so we're an organizational development firm. And once again, I do want to say thank you for having me, David. I feel like you're one of those folks that are always championing conversation, and it's nice to have you in our corner. But
Thank you.
yeah. With Goodstock, I like to describe us as an equity center organizational development firm. And those are a lot of syllables just to say that we help our clients organize and refine their work, their culture, and their communities. And when I say community, that's their internal and external, right? So staff, coworkers, their leaders, but also the folks that they serve whatever their service market is. And so we do that through project management, strat planning, and definitely training and education. Started back in 2018 with a couple of my colleagues from Charleston, South Carolina, and we've been rocking and rolling ever since.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. So why the name Goodstock?
Yeah, so as we are all recovering healthcare administrators, as I like to say. And during that time, unfortunately, my other co-founder, Kelly McKenzie, her parents were very committed to the civil rights movement. So she had her own underpinning passions. And I unfortunately lost my cousin in an Emmanuel massacre. So that was 2015. And I was working as a hospital administrator and going to meetings about community that I felt were void of root cause analyses or root cause conversations. And we know that just by virtue of the United States, we have racism baked into our fabric. So as we were doing our community work, these two ladies came into the space and I was like, who are these amazing ladies who's picking up what I'm putting down? How do we use our powers and roles in the hospital system to really address systemic issues, the implicit biases that are truly impacting health outcomes? So this consulting started when I invited these ladies over to brunch, because that's where all the magic always
Right.
happens. Yes, at brunch, and Kelly was telling the story about her grandma Adele, who would tell suitors when they came by to date one of the McKinsey girls that they come from good stock. And Ebony and I, Dr. Ebony Hilton, who's our third partner, we were like, yeah, good stock. That's exactly what we've been taught as we all came from families of girls. And so good stock reminds us not only of where we come from, but what we hope to harness in every community and every organization that we engage with.
That's interesting. I didn't know the backstory. And I guess, has that name helped or hurt you? Because, there are many firms out there that have DEI somewhere in their name. Does it help you that you are a little different, or has it been more challenging when you're trying to get new clients that you have to, they don't necessarily know what you are based on the name of your organization?
That's a good question. Yeah, so our name has never been flagged as one that was controversial, but it wasn't like our intention to be ambiguous, right? We just wanted a name that really resonated with who we felt like we were, the values of our company, which are baked in leadership and integrity and community. And we felt like Good Stock really resonated with that. But one thing we did have to do, another thing I should add, we didn't brand ourselves as a DEI firm. In fact, in 2020, it was our first engagement. A local hospital asked us to lead a DEI training, and we never even saw it as DEI. We just thought it was cultural humility in healthcare. Like we thought it was just an essential principle that all folks should be talking about. We all have public health backgrounds.
Mhm.
And so equity in healthcare was never novice or never like able to mutually exclusive for us. We thought these things had to happen in tandem. And so from that 2020 engagement, we realized that we may have been taking our teachings for granted. We had taken our experiences as Black women in healthcare for granted. And there weren't a lot of organizations who were centering their work, their values, their conversations, and even their processes with the equity mindset. And so we bundled some packages, we framed some conversations, and it's really been um a gift and a curse, I would say, David, to be a DEI professional in our current climate, or in the climates that have evolved since 2017.
So you've mentioned the word equity several times. Let's just make sure we're all on the same page. So what does equity mean? And maybe also what does it not mean?
Yeah. So in my mind, equity means inviting and appreciating differences. I think sometimes we fall short of the appreciating part. So we'll invite folks to the table, but we don't give them the liberty to speak. Or we invite folks to the table and they don't even feel comfortable enough to throw their feet up, you know? And so it really comes with not just the invitation, but the sense of belonging and appreciation for those differences. No more melting pots, but we making gumbo over there.
That's an interesting way to say it. I guess, yeah, we sometimes hear the term that was a DEI hire, which that's coded for a lot of different things, but I think one of the main code is the person is not qualified, is what the impression is. So I guess, how do you equity is not necessarily equality. So I guess, to sort of explain that you're not necessarily giving quote unquote advantages to people that once again, quote unquote, don't deserve it, or people that are not qualified are still not going to be qualified. I guess you're probably able to articulate what I'm trying to say better than
Yeah,
I am.
I get exactly what you're saying. It's about access, right? So, the difference between equality and equity is that situational fairness. We understand that people of color, we understand that rural folks, we understand that a long list of marginalized communities may not have had the access to do some of the things that that are more privileged have. And so, it's just really about laying the playing field so that everyone has equitable access and meeting them where they are so that everyone has a fair chance to get to success, or everyone has a fair chance to get to that finish line, however it's defined for your industry or for your organization.
Okay. And I guess you sort of talked a little about the backstory, but really, how did you learn how to do this? I mean, there's, you know, I'm a little bit older than you, I think, but there was not DEI classes I went to school. I don't even know if there are now. And I know you're PhDs in public health and background in public health, but how did you and your colleagues learn how to be the experts in this field and to teach others about what you know?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna shout out that public health degree again. I have my undergrad, I have my master's in public health and my PhD in public health. And really, as I said, a pillar of public health is about seeing populations for who they are, what they bring, and seeing one thing I think we've done a good job in Goodstock as well is about seeing the appreciative nature, seeing the strengths of communities before we approach deficits, or leveraging those strengths rather than just harping on the deficits. And so it wasn't, I don't know that it was explicitly taught in my graduate studies, but there are certification programs that you can go
Okay.
through. I do have my certified diversity professional certificate, and we have some freelance and independent organizations that offer those additional credit hours. But I will say that starting in public health really gave me a good foundation to determining how I wanted to apply the lessons learned. And the beauty about learning about equity in public health is that it's really agnostic of industry. Those skills can be transferred across the board. And so you start to help folks understand that meritocracy does not, you don't have to choose one of the over the other, right? You can provide access and still maintain a high caliber of rigor. And that's really what I think tends to be a major rub when folks think about DEI hires or what diversity, equity, and inclusion brings to organizations. They think they have to choose, and it's not
Right.
about choosing at all. Yeah.
So I guess one thing you might disagree. I think, I don't know, we say over the last decade, over the last our lifetime, explicit bias has gone down. And I bet if you talk, and we could discuss, and I bet if you talk to most people, they would say they're not biased and they would believe it themselves. But I think that's sort of, that's only part of it because there is, we'll talk about implicit bias. So you may think it, you may believe it, but I guess my initial thought. So not to say explicit bias is gone, it's complete, everyone's sing kumbaya, but do you still think there's a large group of people or society as a whole is explicitly biased?
I think so. In fact, I think explicit bias is probably on the rise. People are becoming more comfortable in their biases and voicing that in open forums in ways that they never have before. And I'm gonna say it's because of our federal administration. They've made it comfortable for folks to spew hateful rhetoric that they often would have just whispered at the water cooler, right? Or whispered in their family group chats. But now they've become pretty brazen in their disrespect, discontent, and um, hatred for folks who are different from them. But the key about bias is that it's not the folks that are overtly, saying racist things and doing racist things. It's the covert actions that really impact our systems, impact people, because your brain wants to, your brain does what it's told to do or what it's learned to do with no effort and no intention. And so we know social researchers have told us that implicit bias really impacts our systems, our interpersonal relationships, and how we function. And it's because we're typically on autopilot.
So what are some of the covert action that, you're thinking?
Yeah. So when I think of covert actions, I think of like confirmation bias. So only listening to the reporters, the news outlets, media outlets, building an algorithm on social media that just caters to how you think, how you feel, what your experiences have been. That builds a bias. It steeps you in just your own thought, and it prevents you from seeing other perspectives or appreciating differences in cultures. Another one that I see often is, and that I'm maybe even guilty of myself, is the halo and horns, right? So if you identify with a group, you believe all good things about them and that they tried their best and that they're always doing their best. But the horn side is that when you don't have connection to a group or when you have poor thoughts about a group, you can't see any good in that group. And so anything that they do, you can't even attribute it to goodness. You just feel like it's just luck.
No, that is very interesting. So I guess, what can individuals do to try to, I guess, first of all, acknowledge that they have it, and then B, try to prevent it? And is it possible to prevent an individual for a person to say, I'm, because if it's implicit, it's harder, right? But can we
It is.
stop it? Should we stop it, or,
It is.
individually?
Yeah, so I don't think you could ever stop it. Like, I think we all are going to have biases, regardless of where we are, how much we try. We're human, we're not perfect. It's always going to be an issue. But one thing you can do is acknowledge it. Take some time to reflect on your engagements, reflect on your decisions and your behaviors. Keep an honest circle around you that's going to be able to say, hey, that didn't sound right. Or why did you make that decision? Or why do you want to go there? Or why did you say that? And be able to trust that their reflection is a possibility. Even if the intent wasn't there, recognize the impact can still happen. And then the last thing I would offer is to be intentional about change. And whatever that looks like for you, if that means having an accountability partner, reading more books, getting to know people who don't look or think like you, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, but you have to be intentional and personally be able to challenge your own thoughts, beliefs, because those beliefs will eventually become your actions if you leave it unregulated, dysregulated.
That's interesting. I think one other thing we always talk that someone is, biased against someone because they are black or they're this or that. And, I was thinking more, it's not because it's, we think you are black. It's the example. I don't know if you know, Andrew Schultz, who's one of
Yes.
the bro comedians, whatever, but I heard him on a podcast talking about, and this is really interesting, that a lot of people think he's Jewish, which he's not. So he gets a lot of anti-Semitic messages on Twitter, X, and the like. So he's like, I know him all. It's like, I'm not Jewish, but I know him all. And it's an interesting world where it's what the perception of you, when you could always speak a lot better. Obama, ha, half black, half white.
Uh-huh.
He considered himself black, and society considered himself, which is probably the more important thing. Before he was Barack Obama, when he was, Barry, and he had all those of that. But, there's a New York Times had an interesting story a couple years ago about this woman who was light skinned, who lived as a quote unquote white person
Mhm.
in the 50s and 60s, and it helped her.
Yeah, called passing. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
called
mean, yes,
passing.
yes, it's like me telling, yes, but it's really an interesting side. Yeah, the bias is on what we think the person is, not even what the person is, which I think is even crazier.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I mean, it's real perception is reality, right? Whatever you perceive, that is your reality. And that's a gift and a curse because my reality could be very different from yours, despite us even growing up in the same home, in the same community, in the same family, in the same church, at the same workplace, right? Our realities are always going to be very different because we come from different experiences. But that passing that you just talked about with the light skinned woman posing as white, we can, as a dark skinned Black woman, I can say, oh my God, I cannot believe she would do that. How dare she, not own her Blackness and walk in her pride and blah, blah, blah. But also, I have to pause to say, what sort of protective factors did that give her? What was she running away from? Why did she have to choose that? Is it to keep herself safe? Is it to keep her family safe? And before this is the conversation of going back to just being able to pause and give grace where grace is due and choose to believe that everyone's trying to do their best. Everyone's trying to do their best. But then also the other side of my brain is you have to believe people when they show you who they are. And as long as you're not trying to cause intentional hurt, harm, or danger to your fellow brother or sister, my Libra brain could rationalize that you thought this was the best thing to do.
and from reading, it probably was it's about at that time, financially, security, and
Yeah,
everything. And no, it's interesting. I mean, to hear, because I mean, it's the same thing where yes,
yeah.
yeah,
'Cause what if I asked you this, David, what if she was doing that and so that she could get a better job so that she could send money back to her family in the South? Would your perception change about who she is or what type of person she is or why she chose the path? Context always gives us another opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into our biases
well,
and
what's
just
her name? Rachel Dolans? That
read the door along.
which I mean, it was sort of the opposite, but that was
Yeah,
interesting
that
time, a
was
discussion about race in
yeah.
America. And I don't remember how it finally ended, but it was, yes, as for those who don't remember, she was a local branch, was it NAACP? Is that it was? And
Yes,
he was white person
living a black
pretending,
life.
what's the right word? Going
Yeah.
off as black, and leading an
Yeah.
organization that
Oh god. David, she was braiding hair and everything. I mean, like, she had the full act down pat. So there's a thin line between appreciation and appropriation, right? And so being clear about the boundaries of, just respect for other people's culture and lives and choosing the problem with Rachel Dolezal is that she didn't recognize that she had a choice and she was performing a culture that she does not have to commit to every day. So if you can hop in and out of that culture whenever you feel like, it does feel a bit disrespectful and intrusive to pretend to be a black woman because as soon as you're ready and you're tired of being a black woman, you can shrug this tan off and go back to your white parents.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Yes, when preparing for this interview, I had all these questions. That's one that just popped in my head right now. A, a blast
Yeah.
from the past.
Pass from the past.
And actually, to get back on a part you're talking about before, I think the way we pick our friends, we pick people like us. And I don't think there's any bias, but I'm going to go on a limb that people you talk to are, they're highly educated. You're probably higher proportion than average African American, the black. And you mean, and it's not, you're not saying no, not saying yes. And, this, the same with me. But the thing I'm going to argue now, which I've been thinking about the last 6 months, our work in general, a lot of times maybe that last place where there is diversity. I always talk about, there's not at church or not at even bars or restaurants, but there's people and you have to get along with them. they may come from different they most likely come from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic, uh, trades, different stories and everything, and I think it's good. 'Cause I think none of us and I like the people I work with, but yes, I would not have met them in a different place, and I think in a good way. I don't know.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's why it's important for us to have social networks outside of our community, outside of our family, because it does force us to engage with different people, right? But I like to define it as 3 tiers. Like you have 3 tiers of social engagement. The first tier is, engaging with people who look and think like you. Your brain just naturally feels good because if you look and think like me, I think I'm good. So that means you're good too, right? And our brain is going to say, yes, give me more of this because it's validating. But that second tier is engaging with people who may not look like you, but still think like you because your brain can still be soothed around that, right? It still feels validated in your experiences, in your thoughts. But that third tier, which tends to be the hardest and requires the most work, is engaging with people who don't look or think like you, who don't look or think like you, because that requires your brain to learn new things about new people. It requires a bit more effort, and it may even require you to dispel some myths that you had, right? No one likes not knowing. Your brain, especially, doesn't like not knowing. And so we tend to, passively go with folks who look and think like us. But the real work is in finding community, finding genuine connection with folks who don't look or think like you, because that's where we really start to stretch our brain and stretch how we conceptualize folks. And it makes us richer for it,
No,
in my
and I
opinion.
know people that won't wanna talk to people who voted for Trump, for example. And the thing is, I mean, it seems like all we do talk about this day is Trump. Whatever side you're on is all we do, but there are other things. So, yes, you can talk to people of the opposite party and not talk about politics. And most other there's plenty of other things. I think this day and age, we forget it with everything that goes on in the world, but there's plenty of other things, we could talk. I mean, I guess sports teams are a great example.
Yeah,
If
and
people
they
come
can be
together,
just controversial.
they
Have
don't
you
care
seen
who you are. I mean, it's
They don't care, but have you seen people who the Dallas Cowboys? They're feral about their team, right? And so I think it's the same thing about politics. And I almost hate that people do shy away from that conversation about politics with friends, because where else do you then sort your differences? Where else do you then question your own beliefs? How else do you learn something different? And I think it's because we built these silos, and it's probably for psychological safety. I completely agree. I don't know that I have any friends that voted for Trump, honestly. But if I did, I would hope that they feel comfortable enough to say so that we can have conversations about how you got there. How did you get there? Because maybe I'm missing something, or maybe it's a learning opportunity for them, but we have to get to a place where we can talk about differences and it doesn't lead to violence.
right,
That's the
right.
issue. Yeah, I don't care who you voted for, but it's the violence and hatred that I cannot stand for.
Yeah, no. I do have to
Yeah.
confess, I do have explicit bias against Cowboys fans. So I'm gonna just get down in the open. I think that that's allowed, right?
I'll let my husband know. Yeah, to wrap it up if you ever come around.
No. So I guess, um, I guess I've known you what, about 5 years now. I mean, in
Yeah.
that time period, a lot has changed. There was a George Floyd where every company wanted to, show what they were doing in the DEI space. That
Yep.
time now, many are afraid or at least afraid to publicize what they are doing. And it's not just with civil rights that we think of it. A lot of the groups don't want to sponsor the leading LGBTQ organization. They're groups
Mhm.
who spend a lot of money to say that they are with
Hello.
their groups. So I guess on a practical level, what do you advise companies to do now, both in terms of what to do and how to communicate or even communicate? Like, the thing with George Floyd is I think a lot of it was not just doing it. This is me being marketing person, me being cynical, was now we're just doing it. Look, guys, we are doing this. We're a good
Yes.
company. So I guess what do you guess that's a lot in one sort of
Y
questions. What do you think?
yeah, I would say that was the topic of discussion at the top of 2025. What do we do now that we can't use these words? What do we do now that this has become frowned upon. What do we do now that this has been defunded? The problem is that I fear that organizations follow trends, but I would find that the long-standing, sustaining, most successful organizations follow truth, follow integrity.
Okay.
We had what? I think it was over $50 million pledged after George Floyd around DEI conversation, and we know that that has declined significantly. And it's because capitalism doesn't always encourage us to follow integrity. But what I hope organizations and companies are learning is that this generation of shoppers, we are different. Look at Target, for instance. I love Target. I
So
mean,
do I.
like it was my fun Saturday to do. I didn't even know what I needed in Target until I got there because it would tell me what
Right, right.
I needed. Right. And so now that we have issued a boycott on Target because they have chosen not to support DEI initiatives, their sales have plummeted. And this is probably the first time I would say in my lifetime that I've seen a movement like this, a boycott start from start to like middle and truly been able to engage in it and see it work substantially. See it work substantially. So I would advise companies to remain true to who you are, regardless of the words you can use, your actions still count. So what you can say DEI, you can still say communities, you can still say culture, you can still say kindness, you can still say compassion, you can still commit to the values of DEI without saying those words, and you can still do the work. Those who chose not to lets us know who they are. Because if you can quickly just say, well, we ain't doing that no more, that means you didn't want to do it in the first place.
I mean, it does. I mean, for a business perspective, it seems like now the easiest thing to do is nothing because there pushback on nothing. You might say yes, but it's like, okay, it's I don't know. It seems like, why worth, there's always the pros, cons, and there might be high risk, high rewards. Well, this is low risk, but low reward at the same time. It's still the low risk that you're not going to, I don't know. And you don't know you don't know what grip you're going to piss off this day. I mean, and I'll say it's quote unquote both sides. Within a couple weeks, we had the Sydney Sweeney
Mhm,
issue,
mhm.
and
That
that it
was
was that some one side thought there was racism on an ad, and I wrote an article on LinkedIn about this. I said, it's called Sex Sells, and it's been around for a while. And then with Cracker Barrel, when God forbid they changed a logo, it's not a very
Right.
good logo. But then the other side was on there. How dare you take away, what made this mediocre place so great? So it's not on any one side. I think a lot of it just things are just I don't know, is because it is. I think sometimes in general we look harder than it is.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, we can take the passive approach and just say nothing, right? And just try to stay under the radar. But I think you get more bang for your buck. It really is a test of the company's values when they do say something, because it's up to you to determine the type of customer that you want. I'm a firm believer that our racist um, population is a small minority. I choose to believe that because as a Black woman raising Black children, married to a Black man, if I were to wake up every day and commit that majority of the folks in this country are racist, it would be paralyzing, you know? And so I choose to believe the best in that this is a loud minority. The majority of folks in this world, in this country, they want to see good. The problem is that maybe we're not speaking up loud enough. So that's my job, right? To commit to speaking up when I can speak up. And so if a company is choosing to be quiet, that says a lot. That says a lot because I will guarantee you the companies that choose to stand on the right side of history, they'll still be here. They'll still be here doing better than ever, and especially doing better than those who choose to be oppressive or choose to sit on the sidelines and not stand up for what they know to be right. And not saying that you got to stand up for every cause. You don't have the capacity to stand up for everything that's right or wrong in our systems, but you got to pick something. You got to stand for something or you'll fall for everything. Shout out to Dr. King.
Good. Um, are you familiar with Scott Galloway? He's a podcaster. He's a consultant, writer. It's fine. I've been enjoying
Yeah,
him recently. So he's
yeah.
he does a lot of random things. One of those people, but he's a business guy. He's also big into politics, very middle of the road. Some things on both sides, but one thing he's made a conscious effort in the last couple of years to speak about the plight of young men
Mm,
and eh, feeling of left behind. So, as example, why everyone else but me? And some of it, some people might say, poor, boo hoo. But I mean, I've looked at statistics. A lot of times they are falling behind. I'm looking where to go, whether number going to college, being in the workforce. And then once you're not in either of those, you're like, you're down. You're like, I can't, I feel helpless. And so I guess, what do we say as people? But how do we want to lift all boats up. And I think that's what you've always tried to do. And I think there's a thought, and I think there may be some reality of thought that while bringing some other people up, it had to bring, we'll argue this, other people down. And I guess so what because, it's you know, s the white man who's, you help women, you help people of color, you helped, if you wanna go back to the straight white male. And there are some statistics. I guess, how do we lift all boats up?
yeah, so based on what you said when you say, well, to, lift some up, you have to put some down,
Not that you
that
have to, I think that's what happens in life, though, it seems like, or the
that's what
perception is.
I think some do perceive it that way, but I don't believe that because that would make it seem as though equity is limited, or like access is limited. And I don't know that it's limited. I don't know that giving providing access opportunity to marginalized groups naturally takes away from white folks or white men. I mean, it's not pie, Go create another one. Go do some more. There's opportunity. I feel like there's infinite opportunity if you want it. The issue I find, or what I think is the root of this perception that men and white men in general are falling behind, I really think it's a mental health issue. I think it comes from social isolation. COVID did a number on us socially that I don't think many people truly understand. And because men are already less likely to be social as compared to women,
Mhm.
it put them in a deeper hole. Women naturally have, close friendships. Women naturally have vulnerable emotional conversations about their feelings. Women naturally communicate in ways that give them access, or even society lets them feel more comfortable in expressing their feelings. I don't know that men always were taught that it's okay to share feelings and you should, have a close friend group and you should be engaged in things that just make you happy. Men are taught to protect and provide, right? Protect and provide, whereas women are taught to nurture. And now that our gender identities are being questioned, are even being more fluid. I think that some men have been caught in the gap or in the fray of not knowing where to fit with these new feelings that they've developed, or new opportunities to express those feelings. And it's forced them into hiding. But we know that when you hide, it only exacerbates that feeling of loneliness, depression, anxiety. And so rather than focusing on men are falling behind, I think the conversation is, how do we get more men into therapy? How do we get more men into support groups? How do we give men more access to conversations and avenues that are emotionally grounded? How do we teach men about emotional leadership? How do we build up the skills that we as a society may not have encouraged before? I think that's really the conversation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I just think, was it 30 years ago they did the book Bowling Alone, and now it's even more so. I read about, yes, about what percentage don't have like any good
Yeah,
friends. And if where do you meet friends? You meet them at school and work. I mean, it's very
that's
hard as
right.
an adult, or now if
Yes.
your kids, friends, parents, or whatever. But yes, if you are not in school, not a job,
Mhm.
yes, it's even harder. And guys, yes, it is hard. You're like, hey, do you want to hang out to this? No, it's truly tough. Um, let's sort of, talk about, hopefully on a good note, future. Do you think that we are if it sounds like we're going down in your view, but are we gonna go back up? Are we gonna have, truly equity, and then when we just say lower the rate of implicit bias, arguments you can't necessarily get rid of it. Is it gonna be a kumbaya?
I think there will be a kumbaya eventually, David, but honestly, as they say, history repeats itself. Or I like to say it's not a cycle, it's more of a spiral. It's more like a corkscrew, right? So yes, we're going to repeat ourselves, but maybe we're going a little bit further than we did before. So I think something a crescendo we're going to come to a crescendo in this social unrest. I mean, we're experiencing something in my mind that's comparable to Reconstruction, Jim Crow laws, where we are redefining our social landscape in this country, and I'm not sure who's going to win. But something major is gonna happen. This is shifting our DNA. This is shifting an American DNA, and after this big thing happens, there's gonna be a new way of life, and I'm interested to see if my spiral idea is truly true and that we would have inched forward somewhere socially, or if we're gonna digress and go back to something that's unimaginable.
I
I
mean,
don't know.
I have hope for the young generation. Not a lot of things, but in terms of this, I mean, just my kids, it's a very diverse group of friends,
Yeah.
and they don't care. They what they are, not just race. We got religion, gender
Mhm,
identity, and so
mhm.
yeah, I like you. I don't. But
But
and
we
it's not
gotta
even
wait
like a
and
thought of it.
it's not even a thought. I think they say about 48%? It's a little shy of 50% of Gen Z identify as non-white. So, but like you're saying, it's not just about race, ethnicity, it's about class, it's about geographic location, it's about, family status, it's about so many other things. And yes, I am believing in Gen Z. They don't give a damn, and they are they are strong in their words, but we have when do they get into power? They're not in power right now. And so it's going to take time for us to turn the Titanic in a way that's gonna be significant, and I don't know that we're gonna see it in our lifetime, but I believe it's gonna come. It's gonna come, just when.
Right.
Yeah.
I hope so. And I think I mean, once again, this is coming from a white male. But see, no, it seems like now it is better than it was, 20 years ago. Was it better than it was 5 years ago? No. And, clearly better than, before that. I mean, the thing that it's still amazing for me to believe. So my mom grew up in Richmond, Virginia, went to a
Mhm.
segregated elementary school. We're not talking about people, oh, our ancestors, this and that. So my kid's
Oh,
grandmother
yes.
and it was not that long ago.
It
Eh,
wasn't. It wasn't. And that's key, David, to keep in mind. You gotta make these things proximate. We're not talking about history of the ancestors. We're talking about histories of your grandmama, right? And
Yeah,
so when you bring it that close to you, um, hopefully it feels more real to people. But the sad part is that we tend to reference just the 400 years of slavery and not the present day oppression that's happening to a list of communities based on many different factors. And that's the real conversation. What's happening today? In addition to history, we got to know that, but what's happening today? Yeah,
so I guess to summarize, so your thesis is businesses should not be afraid of doing the right thing, in a lack of better terms, that, yes, there may be some who are offended, but it's always best to do what's right, and doing what is right is actually doing something and not nothing. That's
correct. No pun intended. No pun intended, but goodness will always prevail. Good people know good people. And so if you stay focused on the goodness of what you do, the goodness of your sector, the impact that you can make with that goodness, I believe you're gonna be all right. You're
I
gonna
think
be
that's a
all
perfect way to end this. So thank you, Kim, for
yeah, thanks.
joining on the. This has been fun. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David. These conversations are important, so let's keep having them.
Sounds great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right.